X-Men number 126. The X-Men are jetting as fast as they can to Muir Island. It's been a little over an hour since their phone conversation with Lorna. Colossus drops from the hatch like a missile into the center of Moira's Mutant Research Center. Storm drops off Wolverine at the front entrance before taking to the skies to scout the area. Scott parks the jet in the back on the landing pad, and Nightcrawler teleports inside. And right away, he radios Cyclops that he's found Lorna and the dried-up body of Angus McWhirter. And Cyclops is like, that's that racist sea captain. What the fuck is he doing here? Nightcrawler teleports to the lab and hopes that he'll find the rest. And Bad Jesus is here with Lorna because he's depowered. He can't really help. And Cyclops takes to the skies with Storm. They're on their way to the lab to meet up with Nightcrawler. Where Nightcrawler's moving around in total darkness because there's a power outage, Havoc can tell somebody's there, so he attacks, and Nightcrawler says, "It's me, Nightcrawler." And Havoc's like, "Nice try, bub. Nightcrawler's dead." Thankfully, Colossus is there and grabs Havoc, and Havoc tries to blast Colossus, but Colossus is immune to Havoc's power, and Havoc's like, "Oh my god, it is you guys. You're alive." Cyclops and Storm are also creeping around in the dark, and they can hear someone's footsteps, and Storm conjures a wind to pull that person around the corner, and they see that it's Moira, and Moira's like, "Oh my god, you guys are alive. Is Banshee okay?" He's like, "Yeah, the whole team's alive. What's going on? Where's Jean?" And Moira's like, "I don't know, I was just looking for her myself. Mutant X has escaped." Cyclops says, "Storm, take everybody to Moira's house. I'm gonna go find Jean." And he finds her, but she's barely conscious, and when she opens her eyes, all she sees is Jason Wingard. She's like, "Jason, I knew it was you." Cyclops is like, "Who is Jason?" The team regroups in Moira's dining room, and Multiple Man tells them all about how he duplicated himself so that he could scour the island, and one of his duplicates fought Mutant X, but Mutant X sucked the life out of him, and Jimmy Madrox felt the whole thing happened to his duplicate, and he's mourning about it. Cyclops asks Moira, who is Mutant X, and she doesn't want to say. She says it's a private matter, but he gets it out of her that it's her son. He goes by Proteus, that he was beautiful as a baby, but when his mutant power emerged, he turned into a monster, but he has two fundamental weaknesses: his constant need for new host bodies and metal. So he's a body snatcher, and that's why he keeps leaving dried up corpses everywhere. So they've got to find Proteus. Storm and Jean take to the skies, and Jason Wingard's not far away watching Jean. And once again, he puts her in this delusion state where she thinks she's in the 1800s, and she's with Jason Wingard, and they're hunting a stag for sport, and she corners it, so Jason hands her a knife so that she can kill it, and Jason's like, "Genius idea, suggesting we hunt a man playing a stag rather than an animal itself." And Jean feels the hunger to want to kill this man, but she's also afraid and shocked, and it shocks her out of her delusion, and the body in front of her is actually the corpse of the last guy that Proteus took over. He has since moved on to body snatch the body of a policeman, which Wolverine sniffs out, and Proteus tries to take over Wolverine's body, and as soon as he's kind of in there, he realizes that Wolverine's entire skeleton is coated in adamantium. He's like, "Metal!" And he leaves Wolverine's body. And since Proteus can't get in there, his only move is to mind bend the reality of Nightcrawler and Wolverine and Storm, and he warps it so that they don't know what's going on, and Storm pulls up a powerful wind to get him to back the fuck off of them, and it's so strong that it's going to take Wolverine and Nightcrawler with it. So Wolverine hides Nightcrawler under his body, and he slams his claws into the ground to anchor them, and the wind is not doing anything. Proteus is still moving towards Storm. X-Men number 127. Storm is exhausting herself conjuring winds to try to blow Proteus away from herself, but he's moving closer, so she attempts a getaway, but he warps her perception of reality, and she thinks she's flying upward into the ground. With Storm knocked out, Proteus is ready to steal her body, but he starts getting shot at by Moira, who's positioned with a sniper rifle, and he's weakened to bullets because it's metal. And just as she's about to take the kill shot to murder her son, Cyclops stops her. She takes the butt of the rifle to his ribs, and then he knocks his head on a rock on his way down. She's like, "I'm sorry for knocking you out, but I've got to take care of this on my own." And in the meantime, Proteus has gotten away, but he's been headed south continuously this whole time, and she thinks she knows where he's headed. A little while later, the team is really shaken up, especially Wolverine, after Proteus hopped into his body momentarily before hopping back out. Cyclops sees this, and he decides that he's got to get Wolverine to snap out of it, so he picks a fight with Wolverine, and he doesn't tell anyone why. It isn't long before the rest of the team jumps in, except for Jean, because she's reading his mind, and she knows that he's basically treating this as a danger room session, which everyone actually appreciates once he surrenders and lets everyone know what he was doing. Meanwhile, Proteus is stealing another body and another car, so the X-Men have no idea what he's looking like and what he's driving. The only thing they have to go by is Wolverine's nose to track the scent of Proteus if they hope to find him. Moira's pretty sure that Proteus is after his father, her husband, a man they both hate. He's a member of Parliament who beat her ass 20 years ago and left her in New York, in the hospital and pregnant. Moira tells him that he has a son and that his son's on his way to kill him. And he is about to hit her again when she pulls out a gun and says, "Don't move, I just came here to warn you." And he tells her, "Okay, you warned me, get out." So she leaves. Mr. McTaggart calls the police, but he's too late. Proteus is already there, prepared to murder his father for hurting his mother. But the fucked up thing about his power is that when he absorbs a new person, he absorbs their memories and their feelings, and so he takes his father's body, and his father hates Moira, who's parked outside still, so he goes outside and tries to kill Moira. And although Jean can't track Proteus, psychically she hears his father scream as Proteus takes his body, and she's like, fuck, I know where he is. And she picks up the entire X-Men team and she flies them there, just using her telekinetic power alone. Proteus is working his reality perception warping mojo on Moira, and the X-Men can see this from above, so they drop Colossus down there because he's made of metal. But Proteus bends reality and gets Colossus away from him. Cyclops tries to attack him and it's no good, and Phoenix is ready to tear him apart, so Proteus grabs Moira and threatens to snap her neck. Sean is horrified at 1, the fact that Moira's in trouble, and 2, that she has a husband. And Moira tells the team, don't worry about me, let him kill me, you need to kill him, I'm less important. And in the moment, Cyclops kind of agrees, but they really don't know what to do. X-Men number 128. The X-Men are in a fight against Proteus, and he's not just attacking them, he's warping the reality of the entire downtown area that they're in, and people are running scared. Proteus is warping everything, he's even warping Moira, and the best thing the X-Men can do right now is keep all the civilians out of harm's way. For a brief moment, all the illusions stop, and nobody really knows why. Cyclops guesses that maybe Proteus is worn out, like it's too many illusions all at one time. Whatever the cause, it's given Scott the time to come up with a plan. Proteus is taken off, the X-Men follow, and Phoenix starts by attacking him, and she's giving him everything she's got. She's really trying to weaken him, and it gives Wolverine a chance to get in there and start hurting him too, and Wolverine's got metal claws, so it actually does a decent amount of damage. Cyclops tells Wolverine, good job, now get Moira the fuck out of here, and Cyclops and Havoc go at it at the same time against Proteus with their optic beams and cosmic energy bolts. Proteus uses his reality warping power to warp himself out of the way, and Cyclops and Havoc end up hitting each other. And Proteus chases down Wolverine and Moira, and he does get her. Wolverine falls. Cyclops saves him by pulsing his optic beam so that he can like bounce his way down, breaking his fall. And now it's up to Colossus to chase him down. Moira asks Proteus, what are you going to do next? Snatch my body next? And then what? Everybody else in the rest of the world, you're just going to keep doing this forever and ever? And Proteus is talking from these two conflicting perspectives. One of them's his dad's and one of them's his, because he's got all those thoughts wrapped up in his head. And he's like, you should have just killed me when I was a baby. I was born out of evil. I know my dad raped you to make you pregnant with me and then put you in the hospital. That's why I'm a monster now, and that's why I'm going to kill you. Until Colossus reaches them and he's like, you're not going to kill anyone, and he throws Proteus against the wall so hard that his body, his decaying body, just shatters into dust, and Proteus's true form is like just this weird energy, and he comes for Colossus. He tries to snatch Colossus's body, and just as he gets close enough, Colossus turns to metal and shoves his metal fists inside of like the center of Proteus's energy body, and Proteus is shattered into a million pieces, dispersed across the globe, and the rest of the X-Men got to get up there and make sure everything's okay. So Jean flies them up there, and Colossus is holding Moira, and she's like really upset because her child died and her abusive ex-husband was in her life at all today, and then he died, which is just a lot for anybody. But everybody's really proud of Colossus, and Sean Cassidy's there to make Moira feel better. X-Men number 129. The X-Men are departing from Scotland, leaving Banshee behind since he's effectively depowered anyway, and Moira's here, who he loves, so he'll be a better partner to her than he is a member of the X-Men. Colossus is privately struggling with the fact that he killed Proteus, because the X-Men typically don't kill people, and he feels really guilty about it, and Jean's about to slip into another 18th century nightmare. Jason Wingard is literally flying a plane that is just close enough to the X-Men's jet to where he still has a psychic rapport over Jean. And this time she's more freaked out than she has been in previous times, because up until now she thought it was Proteus creating all these illusions in her head, but now that Proteus is dead and it's still happening, she's pretty shaken up. And even within the fantasy, she needs a break to just like breathe and figure out what's going on. And even as she's snapping out of it and Scott asks her if he can help her in any way, she doesn't know how to explain what she's been going through. And then Scott's like, alright, well let me explain something to you. And he starts to tell her that he's been dating Colleen Wing, and Jean's like, I know already, and I didn't read your mind. I couldn't help but pick it up off of everybody else's minds. But Scott makes it clear that he doesn't feel for Colleen what he feels for her. The strongest thing he feels for Colleen is friendship, and for Jean, he's in love with her, and he's lost so many people in his life, but the loss that hurt the most was when he lost Jean, and he tells her, I love you, I want to be with you, you are my everything, and that kind of sets everything back where it's supposed to be with them. They spend the rest of the flight home cuddling and kissing, and then when they get home, Xavier's home. It really feels like old times, except that Jean caught a stray thought out of Professor Xavier's mind that he really only came here to study Jean and Jean's power because he feels like she can't control it. Another thing that can't be controlled is Wolverine. Professor Xavier is trying to put the X-Men through some tests in the danger room, and it's not going well. Wolverine storms out. Xavier's like, that's going to cost you 10 demerits, and Cyclops tells him that he doesn't give a fuck about demerits. This is not a team of children like your original X-Men team. We are adults, we are individuals, we have our own ways of doing things, and we're not going to be mashed into the same kind of team that you made us become the first time. And Professor Xavier's like, that's because of a failure in your leadership, Scott. I left you in charge. You did not create a cohesive team, and I'm going to fix that. And Scott tries to get through to him, but luckily they're interrupted by Cerebro, which has picked up 2 new mutants, one in Chicago, the other in New York. And so they table this discussion for now, but Scott is really upset about it. He's like, why the fuck is he talking to me like I'm a little kid? And Professor Xavier's first instinct is to split the team up. He sends Jean with Scott to New York to collect the one mutant, and then he's going to take Colossus, Storm, and Wolverine with him to Chicago to collect the other mutant. And Jason Wingard is watching this whole thing. He has tapped Cerebro way back when, in issue 110, when Warhawk came into the mansion and was fucking around. He was tapping the computers for the Hellfire Club, and they plan to send Emma Frost out to go intercept one of the mutants before the X-Men can get to her. That mutant is Kitty Pryde, and her parents are conducting interviews for the new school that they're going to send her to. The first person to get there is Emma Frost, and while they're interviewing her, Kitty says she's got a headache and she goes upstairs to lay down, and she falls through the floor, lands in the living room. She doesn't know how that happened because she doesn't understand her powers yet. On Emma Frost's way out, the X-Men are walking in, and Emma Frost knows exactly who they are, but they don't know her, so they aren't alarmed. Professor Xavier stays to talk to the parents while the rest of the X-Men take Kitty out to go get ice cream. And Storm is spilling all the tea. She's like, have you heard of the X-Men? Kitty is so enamored with her because of her beauty and the fact that she's a hero. She's like, oh my god, can I have your autograph? Storm connects with Kitty because she's like, damn, I could have maybe had this childhood too if it hadn't been for the Suez War. And in Kitty, she sees her own childhood that might have been. But their nice time gets interrupted by these 3 armored attackers that each go after one of the X-Men. And they seem to be prepared and immune to each one of their specific X-Men's attacks. So the X-Men realize this, trade partners, knock them all out. Kitty accidentally pushes herself outside the building, and they're like, damn, we did a really good job. I wish the Professor X could have seen this. And just then Emma Frost walks in, and she uses her mental powers to sedate the X-Men. They load them inside of their hovercraft, and they take off. Little do they know that Kitty has figured out how to use her powers intentionally, and she snuck onto the ship with them. X-Men number 130. Jean, Kurt, and Scott are in New York searching for the second mutant that Professor X found pop up on Cerebro. They're in the seedy nightclub, and Jean is scanning everyone's thoughts to try to find the mutant, and the people in there are thinking nasty raunchy things, and Jean is like, turned on. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men and Professor X have been captured and have been strip searched and are being held by Emma Frost in Chicago at this facility. Sebastian Shaw checks in on them from the Hellfire Club, and no one knows that Kitty Pryde is there too. She snuck in and she's looking for a way to save the X-Men. And Aurora is always prepared. She has a phone number sewn into the tag on her outfit, which Kitty manages to get from her before taking off and diving through the floor so that the henchmen can't get her. Back in New York, Jean and Scott are still looking for that mutant, and they've split up, and Jean runs into Jason Wingard, and he's like, hey, remember me? I met you in Ireland. And she makes eye contact with him and immediately is sucked in to that fantasy again. She's back in the 1800s, and they are getting married. They're at the altar. She's saying I do. She's totally into it this time. She kisses him. He takes off her veil. She is the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. And then when she snaps out of it, she's back in the club, and Scott is like, who the fuck are you kissing? And at this point, Jean thinks that maybe an ancestor of hers married an ancestor of Jason Wingard's, and maybe the power of the Phoenix is enhancing her psychic powers to where she's experiencing the previous life of, one of her ancestors. But before she can even begin to explain it, the announcer comes out on the stage, and they announce the performer for the night, Dazzler. And that's the mutant they've been looking for. Nightcrawler's been outside this whole time playing lookout because he's blue, he doesn't want to go in the club, and also he doesn't want to use the image inducer that the Professor X gave him anymore. He just wants to be himself. And while he's out there, the car phone rings, so he answers it, and it's Kitty Pryde, and she's like, the X-Men have been captured, you guys need to come help right now. And while he's distracted, he's attacked. Meanwhile, inside the club, Jean and Scott are attacked as well, and Jean uses her Phoenix powers to just transform the molecules of their clothing into their uniforms. And these attackers are ready for the X-Men because they downloaded all that info from the Danger Room exercise computers. But they are not prepared for Dazzler. And she's pissed because they've just ruined her concert. So she projects this seizure-inducing light show, which makes one of the bad guys go catatonic. That's the one that was attacking Jean Grey. So now she's free to save Cyclops, and Cyclops is free to take out a couple more bad guys. Dazzler actually feels bad because she's never used her powers to attack anyone before. She just uses it to make sparkles around herself when she's performing on stage. Regardless, they're all free now, so they go outside and they help out Nightcrawler, and they clue in Dazzler as to the fact that they're X-Men and she's a mutant. And they're like, have you ever wondered where your mutant powers came from? And she's like, nope. But they tell her that she's a mutant, and Nightcrawler tells them that the rest of the X-Men are in trouble. So they hop in the car, they take off, they're getting shot at. Jean is deflecting bullets with her telepathy, and they pass Jason Wingard on the corner, and Cyclops recognizes the Shadow as Mastermind Shadow, but it doesn't really register with him, and he's like, why do I know that Shadow? But all he's thinking about is the fact that Jean kissed him in the club, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? X-Men number 131. Kitty Pryde is being chased by Emma Frost's goons down the alleys of Chicago. Thankfully, the Phoenix shows up right on time to save her. Phoenix uses her telekinetic powers to crush the car that the goons are driving. Kitty Pryde is in awe of this. But before she can make sense of what she's seeing, Nightcrawler teleports behind her and carries her up to the top of the building out of harm's way. Cyclops and Dazzler pull up behind Jean, and Cyclops is like, what have you done? These men are injured and hanging out of this totaled car. And Jean tells Scott that she was reading their thoughts and that they're disgusting people and they deserved it. She then carries Dazzler and Cyclops to the top of the building to meet up with Nightcrawler and Kitty, but Kitty has ran off because she's afraid of the way Nightcrawler looks. Jean searches for Kitty's thoughts, and she's able to locate where she is. She psychokinetically rearranges the molecules of her Phoenix costume into regular street clothes, and she goes down and she grabs Kitty, and she's like, I can hear you. I know you're scared, but you're safe now. They take the injured goons back to the X-Jet, and Jean reads their minds and learns about the Hellfire Club, about Emma Frost, and she sees Jason Wingard in their minds, which is so confusing to her because she's been having all these thoughts about her ancestor, who she believes to have married an ancestor of Jason Wingard, so she knows him now, and she's like, how is this all connected? And Scott's like, are you okay? And Jean's like, I'm fine, I have the information we need. So the X-Men come up with a plan. Jean telekinetically puts the car back together after having smashed it, and then she puppets the goons that they've knocked out into driving them into the Hellfire Club as prisoners. Meanwhile, Kitty's sneaking in the back. They make it past the gates to the front entrance. Jean telepathically connects everyone so they can communicate. Scott blasts the top of the car with his optic blast so that Dazzler can stand up and blind the fuck out of everybody there. Emma Frost is somewhere else with Aurora, and she's trying to mentally incapacitate her. So when Kitty gets in there, it's just Logan, Colossus, and the Professor. She rescues Logan, but then she's shot by a stun gun in the back, and Logan is not happy about this. Emma Frost catches wind of the fact that the building's under attack, but before she can do anything about it, Jean Grey confronts her, and she is ready to fuck her up, and Aurora just stands there, horrified at the way Jean is destroying Emma Frost's mind. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men take out the rest of the Hellfire goons. Colossus is taking very good care of Kitty, which she very much appreciates. And in another building, the Phoenix is draining the life force out of Emma Frost, and that building explodes. The X-Men run to make sure that everything's okay, and Phoenix is fucking fine. And she has Aurora with her too, so everybody's good. The only person they don't have is the Professor, who has been hiding in the background watching this whole time, observing how they work together, which is fucking weird. So yeah, the X-Men save the day. They take Kitty home, and Kitty's parents are freaking out. They're like, where the fuck did you take our daughter? You told us you were taking her to an ice cream shop. The ice cream shop has exploded. There are dead bodies there. The only reason we knew she wasn't dead is because they identified the dead bodies and it wasn't our daughter. Who do you think you are? And then suddenly he's like, it's so good to see you again. We've been thinking a lot about your school for gifted youngsters, and we think it's a great place for our daughter Kitty. And Scott's like, what the fuck was that? And even the Professor doesn't know what just happened. It was Jean. And Scott's like, Jean, you did not just do that to that man and that woman. She goes, I had to do what I had to do. We need to not waste time here. We need to just take Kitty back with us. And that man's tantrum was wasting our time. And Scott's just like dumbfounded. And even Aurora was like, yeah, I don't know about all this. This seems not very ethical. The way she's been behaving lately seems like something else is consuming her. And we got to figure out what it is.